Welcome back. Well, as you know, the recent state Supreme Court ruling saying that frozen embryos are children and protected under the Wrongful Death of the Child Act has caused a lot of uncertainty and fear, especially for couples who were counting on IVF to start or even expand their families. And today, Michelle Essery from Fullwell Neurofeedback and Counseling in Hoover joins us live today to break down sort of the emotional aspect behind this ruling. Michelle, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Claire.
So, first of all, IVF is already sort of an emotional process. What are some of the common experiences of dealing with infertility and IVF?
IVF is probably, or maybe infertility and what leads to IVF is probably one of the more emotional things that people can deal with. You know, Most of us have experienced a little bit of grief or maybe a little bit of hope that's been lost or the death of a loved one or things like that. But when you put all of those things together on a bit of a roller coaster, right? It's almost like you're cycling through this series of grief and loss and then hope and excitement and then grief and loss. And then you add on top of that a hormonal factor, right? That you're taking hormones and doing things like that that are making your body feel like not your own. You're removing some of the joy of some of the things that are usually really joyful, and they become something that carries a lot of pain. It can be traumatic. The loss of a child can be incredibly traumatic, no matter when in the process you lose the child. And so the whole process of infertility and IVF can be an incredibly emotional process for people. This kind of high, high and low, low experience. It's a bit like a roller coaster.
And then you add on top of that this ruling. And how do you feel like it might impact couples emotionally? And how can they deal with that?
I think one of the biggest things is it feels like a shut door where there have already been so many shut doors, right? The thing that I've heard the most is there was this hope, again, this hope, and having that hope taken away. It also brings up questions for people. They've had to wrestle with this reality of I'm not able to have a child in the way that would be traditional, and I'm having to go this route that doesn't feel nearly as magical or romantic, right? It's very scientific, very clinical. And then to have that questioned, it can lead to guilt and shame that isn't helpful, isn't useful, right? In this case. And so just the fact that those emotions are there, it doesn't answer the question of right or wrong, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about. But as far as the emotional experience goes, it's a really challenging thing. The fact that this has come up is adding more of that hope and that loss to that roller coaster.
You briefly touched on it, but do you have any advice for those who are being impacted by this ruling?
One of the best things to think about is when you're in an emotional roller coaster, or if you're in this up and down and this grief and loss, what are the things that you have that are stable? It's almost like if you're in the river, where's a rock you can sit on? It's that sort of picture, that metaphor. What is stable? And maybe it's your relationship with your partner, your spouse. Maybe it is your faith. Maybe it is taking the time to take care of yourself in an otherwise really difficult time, right? Like take care of yourself physically in a time when your body doesn't feel like your own. There are some really specific things you can do to bring yourself kind of down to a neutral, stable place. The more you can stabilize, the more that you can have routine, the more that you can be around the people you love, the more that you're going to be able to make it through something that feels like that storm around you, like that raging river.
Do you feel it would be important for either a woman or a couple going through this to maybe seek counseling just for their overall well being and mental health?
I think counseling is a great idea in times like this. Obviously, as a counselor, I have a bit of a bias, but everybody has things in their life that are really difficult. And we all at times could use somebody to stand in it with us, especially if we don't have a lot of other people to help us walk through it. A lot of times, the people who are in our day to day lives are so emotionally invested. Going to talk to somebody who can help us sort it out can feel like that rock in the middle of the river, right? It can feel like having somebody who can help you be stable in the midst of everything else.
Absolutely. Michelle Essery from Fullwell Neurofeedback and Counseling in Hoover, we appreciate you being with us today. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Claire.